We will get started, try to keep on time. Welcome, everybody. My name is Frank Segall. I'm the chairman of the Cannabis Business and Law Group at Burns & Levinson. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on behalf of my partner, Scott Moskol, who's on our panel, and the other panelists who I will introduce to you shortly. And we're here to talk about permissible payments in cannabis, safer alternatives to cashless ATMs and blockchain, which obviously is a very, very timely and hot topic and issue of major concern throughout the industry. We've had 200 people sign up for today. A lot of them are logging on right now. So I'd like to give you a brief overview about Burns & Levinson and talk about the webinar. And we'll dive into it with our panelists. For those of you who are not familiar with Burns & Levinson, we have been at the forefront of the cannabis industry for over 10 years. We're a firm that has serviced its clients for over 60 years. We're headquartered in Boston. We have a national practice with 130 attorneys. We have over 20 attorneys that are dedicated to the cannabis practice. We were the first major firm in Boston, one of the first major corporate firms in the country to dive into this space and launch a dedicated practice group. And the goal that Scott and I had when we launched this was to create a go-to law firm for corporate needs in cannabis. There's a little feedback, Bridget, so you can take care of that. What we wanted to do was create an ecosystem for our clients. And today we're very proud to say we have a national practice that represents leading venture capital, leading operators, state, regional, and national operators in this space, private equity. We're proud to be on many M&A transactions, security matters, providing general corporate services to this industry so that our clients have resources that they can go to within our own ecosystem that will enable them to thrive in this business. And one of the other areas of primary focus for us is banking and payments and compliance. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And we're very pleased to have Tina Strager and Kathy Iamizzelli, two leaders in this space, and in full disclosure, clients of Burns & Levinson, will be sharing with us their insight into that area. As we all know, cannabis is highly regulated, and banking is one of the most troubled areas for us as operators and entrepreneurs in the space. The major lenders are still not in the space. The credit unions, state chartered banks, and finance companies have stepped up to provide capital, and that's a growing market. But where there still are complexities and obstacles are in regulatory compliance and payments and processing. And that's what we're going to dive into today. Now, there have been creative solutions that have come along we're going to talk about, but we're also going to ask the question, are they really creative solutions, or are they mostly smoke and mirrors that are concealing transactions that violate the policies of the major credit card companies and constitute various risks for operators? And Terry Neeley and Scott Moskol are going to really dive into that as well. So with that, I want to introduce our panelists who are going to guide us through this today. With us is Tina Strager. Tina is the president of Lighthouse Business Solutions. And Tina is a pioneer, truly a pioneer in the banking industry. Tina was the president and CEO of GFA Federal Credit Union, which launched Lighthouse Business Solutions, and she then became the president of Lighthouse so that she could really focus entirely on providing banking services to the cannabis industry. Tina was led the first institution in Massachusetts to take both medical and recreational deposits, and has been involved with over $2 billion in deposit transactions since its inception. So we're thrilled to have Tina with us. Also with us is Kathy Iamizzelli. Kathy is the co-founder, president, and chief payment officer of KindTap, which we're going to hear about today. KindTap is a unique digital business platform providing credit to consumers in the cannabis space, which really has not been done to date. And Kathy will talk about that. She brings 30 years of experience in financial services and payments as a line executive and a consultant. and we're very thrilled that she could join us today. Rounding out the panel is Terry Neeley, and Bridget, there's still some background. Terry is the founder of West Coast AML Services, and I rarely read resumes, but I'm going to read you this one, and it's not a Netflix series. This is Terry. Terry's a well-respected expert in the federal law enforcement, bank secrecy act, money laundering control field with over 25 years of firsthand experience investigating drug money laundering organizations, white-collar financial crimes, and terrorist financing. He is a key figure in the most significant drug money laundering investigation in U.S. history, which involved the indictment of foreign banks and 24 bankers for violations of BSA and AML. So we're thrilled to have Terry, and Terry will be talking with Scott about the serious risks that are involved in using non-compliant platforms, and I'm sure he will scare us all a little bit, so stick around for that. Now that I've set the table, let's kind of get into this a little. As I said, we're here to talk about permissible payment platforms, and we're going to focus on those that we find highly troubling and that we feel are non-compliant, particularly the cashless ATM, pinless debit, crypto, blockchain. And some are very obvious. For example, if your address is 1 Main Street in Waltham, Massachusetts, and your customers are getting receipts that say Joe's Sunglasses in San Diego, there's a good chance you've got a non-compliant system. Or if you're going into a store, you're making a purchase, and that store is text messaging you, the purchaser, to send your Visa information through a blockchain into a wallet, there's a very good chance that's a non-compliant system. Or if your processor tells you, by the way, we're going to route everything through Malta, there's a red flag for you as well. So we're going to talk about these things. And the basic question that people ask is, well, why are these problems? Well, they're problems because you're operating on the rails and systems of the credit card companies. And Kathy and Tina are going to go into that in more detail. But let me just highlight very briefly the policies of the credit card companies. American Express simply says that some merchants are not eligible to accept the card, and they may terminate its acceptance if they determine or have reason to believe in their sole discretion that you meet any of the following criteria. You're a marijuana-related business. You're an individual or entity that manufactures, processes, distributes, or dispenses marijuana or byproducts, whether for recreational or medicinal purpose, and whether or not subject to a governmental license. Discover, their policy says we reserve the right to decline. Next slide, Bridget, please. We reserve the right to decline any debit card transaction if we suspect fraud, takeover, or illegal activity or unusual activity. Further, we reserve the right to suspend or freeze the funds in your account you maintain with us if you don't provide information we request, or we believe your account may be subject to illegal or fraudulent activity. MasterCard says a merchant may not submit to its acquirer, and a customer must not submit to the interchange system any transaction that is illegal or in the sole discretion of the corporation may damage the goodwill of the corporation or negatively reflect on its marks. And then there's Visa. And Visa has certainly sent a ripple through the industry. Next slide. Visa says an acquirer must not knowingly accept from a merchant for submission into the Visa system any transaction that is illegal or that they should have known is illegal. An acquirer must have a merchant agreement with each of its merchants to accept Visa cards. A payment facilitator must have a merchant agreement with each of its merchants, and they must not knowingly submit any transaction that is illegal or that the merchant should have known is illegal. Now, back in December, Visa also came out with a memo regarding cashless ATM, which I want to just highlight to you. And that has really started a lot of this investigation, which was also followed up by the Bloomberg article many of you are familiar with. But Visa's memo said, Visa is aware of a scheme where POS devices marketed as cashless ATMs are being deployed at merchant outlets and are operating in violation of the Visa rules and its service and rules. Cashless ATMs are POS devices given by payment applications that mimic standalone ATMs. However, no cash disbursements are made to cardholders. Instead, the devices are used for purchase transactions, which are miscoded as ATM cash disbursements. Cashless ATMs are primarily marketed to merchant types that are unable to obtain payment services. Therefore, supporting this scheme affects the integrity of the Visa network. Acquirers will be subject to non-compliance assessments and/or penalties when they or their third-party agents are found in material non-compliance with Visa rules. When found to have violated the rules adversely affecting Visa, they may be subject to further compliance. We're going to get into this, and Terry and Scott in particular are going to talk about what that really means and what one's exposure is. So what I'd like to do is now turn this over to Kathy. And Kathy's going to give us a bit of a primer on what all this is about. And Tina is going to jump in about what Lighthouse is doing to protect its customers and its institution. And then Kathy is going to share with us highlights of KindTap and its new program that is partnering with GFA and other lenders in the industry. Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay. All right. Well, let's start this primer on cannabis payments with a discussion of the card networks. There are two types of card networks. There are the credit debit networks, Visa, MasterCard, and Discover. And then there are ATM networks. And you probably don't know their names because they've all been bought by the card association. So you've got these networks that have both ATM sides and credit debit sides. They all have in common that they have members on both sides, the consumer and the merchant side, but consumers and merchants aren't members. Banks are members, financial institutions, and they agree to follow the rules of the network and enforce those rules on their consumers and their merchant customers. Now, one of the rules, as Frank just went through, is that you cannot do anything illegal with their payment products. And they've taken the position that as long as cannabis is illegal at the federal level, that their cards and products are not permissible for use for purchase of cannabis. Now you'll hear lots of fast talking merchant sales reps saying, oh, I have a solution to work around that. I use offshore processing, or I actually do a cryptocurrency conversion. The problem that the card associations have with that is, A, it's not following their rules, and it's confusing the customers because they've spent a lot of money creating a consistent experience with what it means when their card is used. And these workaround solutions confuse that. And so from a business and a marketing perspective, they absolutely do not support that kind of activity. Anytime you see a payment card being used in a dispensary to purchase cannabis or on an e-commerce site directly from a cannabis retailer, you can be assured it is in violation of the network rules. And so that begs the question, well, what if this same card is used in the dispensary to slide into an ATM and get cash out of an ATM in the dispensary? That is just fine because the consumer's not buying cannabis with that card, they're getting cash. As long as that ATM is serviced by a third party who is not recycling cash from the dispensary into the ATM, then that is a perfectly legal and compliant use of this card in the dispensary. And that takes us to, though, cashless ATMs, which are not okay, as we've all been learning lately. And often it starts with dispensaries telling consumers it's PIN debit and just go ahead and use this as PIN debit. It's not. They're completely different products. Cashless ATMs, you have to round up the purchase price to the nearest dollar or $5 or $10 increment. So it spoofs the ATM networks into thinking that it is a cash actually being withdrawn. And on the bank statement from the consumer, it has the ATM owner's information. With PIN debit, you settle to the penny and the bank statement shows the address of the merchant. More important than that is the economics are completely different. With cashless ATMs, the ATM owner or the cashless ATM owner is charging a fee that they often share with the dispensary, but they are also collecting a fee from the consumer's bank for providing the service to the bank customer of giving them cash, which of course they're not doing. With PIN debit, it's exactly the opposite. The merchant pays the consumer bank for processing that transaction. So when the ATM networks and the credit debit networks came under common ownership, they cracked down on cashless ATMs, only to have them reemerge a few years ago for cannabis. This time not to arbitrage the fees, but to allow the cards to be accepted in the dispensaries. Well, we can expect that that crackdown will be complete pretty soon here, and cashless ATMs will be gone from dispensaries. So that leaves the only real compliant solution other than cash for cannabis payments, companies like KindTap, who have built their own network for moving money between consumers and merchants without touching the Visa or MasterCard rails. And the way you do that is through the automated clearinghouse system for the movement of money. Well, the ACH is owned by the Federal Reserve. And in order to move money through the Federal Reserve ACH system, you have to be a licensed financial institution. And so as you're looking at companies who are providing these proprietary cannabis payment networks, you want to make sure that they are either licensed at the state level for money movement or working in partnership, as KindTap is with GFA, with a licensed financial institution. You don't want to be working with somebody who doesn't have a licensed financial institution involved, because all that money in movement could be gone one morning if they wake up and say, it hit the number I've been looking for, sayonara, and you've just lost your sales proceeds. So just to sum it up, cards for purchase, branded cards, hard no. Cashless ATMs about to become a hard no. ATMs in the dispensaries fine as long as they're serviced by a third party, and proprietary networks fine as long as they are provided by or in partnership with a licensed financial institution.
Tina, maybe you can jump in and talk about how you've dealt with this issue and what you look for and how you advise your operator clients in particular. And then afterwards, maybe we can bring it back to why you ended up partnering with KindTap.
Absolutely. Thank you, Frank. And Kathy, I think that you've done a fabulous job in terms of trying to decipher the differences between P2P, B2B, ACH, cashless, PIN, debit, and all of the above. I think, I want to start off, first of all, by saying that, it is a maze, right? It's very complicated. And if you don't deal with it every day, as Kathy does, we all sit here and sometimes scratch our heads, because it seems like every day there's a new and improved solution for our cannabis dispensaries. And, when we first started banking the cannabis industry, we went and did due diligence on a select group of merchant processors and said, we're going to look under the hood, we're going to kick the tires, and we're going to consider them to be compliant partners, and they're the ones that we will recommend to our dispensaries. And that lasted for about 6 months, and then all of a sudden, and no exaggeration, it's probably 2 or 3 merchant processors that are out there every week reaching out to us, telling us that they've got a compliant solution, they've got a way to accept credit cards, they've got a way to accept debit cards without the cashless ATM. Or we have clients coming to us because they've been solicited by a new and improved solution. And so for the longest time, we would agree to work on behalf of our clients and do the due diligence and look under the hood, only to realize that, when you examine a merchant processor today, they may be using different partners to settle the transactions, but that can easily change. And so we've come to the conclusion that we will assist our clients in doing the due diligence, but at the end of the day, it really is up to the client to do ongoing due diligence, because again, as I said, the processing, the mechanics to the to how the transactions flow can be this way today and another way tomorrow. Frank, you commented about, is the address of the transaction for the consumer the correct address? And we saw the publication recently where there was a whole host of transactions occurring at cannabis dispensaries, but the consumer's bank statements was showing up that they were, had done a transaction at McDonald's across the street or something. That is something that needs to be tested by the cannabis dispensary periodically, because that should be a red flag, because that transaction is being disguised. So
it's even more than that, Tina. We know of dispensaries that are fully aware of that. They print out the receipts. So it's kind of hard to turn a blind eye or say you're not aware of that. I think that's a bit of disingenuous by those operators. I mean, it's such a clear flag in those cases.
And when those operators do that, so we're talking about policy here. When those transactions are cloaked like that, that operator is engaging in conspiracy now with that payment processor to cloak the fact that those funds are derived from even legal cannabis sales with the settling financial institution.
Mm-hmm. So buyer beware, ongoing merchant due diligence.
And
I think sometimes.
Well, no, I
ahead,
was going to say that, I think a lot of cannabis operators, compliance is a four-letter word for them, but this is a very, very difficult business because of the federal illegality, and compliance never ends and due diligence never ends. And you just can't turn a blind eye because, I mean, as Terry and I'll talk about, there's the Ease case, which is a huge example of folks committing bank fraud. And that's what we're talking about here.
So Tina,
to add to that piece too, I'll just say this to add to that piece. So why would a financial institution, even cannabis-friendly financial institutions, why would they be concerned? What difference does it make what merchant processor, what payment solution the dispensary chooses? So when we talk about that Visa warning, right? So the cannabis operator, if collectively we're allowing anything to occur that is not proper, and collectively we are riding the rails of Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover, we are all guilty. And so what financial institution, first and foremost, wants to have their financial institution be on the Visa blacklist? What merchant or what dispensary wants to be on a Visa blacklist? There is no financial institution that wants to wake up one day and receive a letter from any of the major card players saying they're being shut down, because that means that they're not just being shut down to serve the cannabis industry. It means that they're being shut down, and never heretofore will they be able to give a debit or credit card to any of their businesses or any of their customers. So that is, close the doors and you're out of business, because that is a risk that no financial institution is going to accept. Conversely, no cannabis dispensary wants to be on that blacklist, because if and when cannabis is considered legal at the federal level, and it's probably a when, not an if, all of the other dispensaries that have been compliant will be able to accept credit cards, and the dispensary that's been blacklisted will not be able to accept credit cards. So really, if I'm a cannabis dispensary, I really need to pause. I know I don't have the time, but I pause and make sure that I do the proper due diligence to make certain, not just based on what that processor is going to charge me, but make certain that they're operating in compliance. And there's a whole host of checklist points that we can go through, many, too many for today. Happy to share that list with everyone. But when a cannabis dispensary asks us to look under the hood of a merchant processor, the first thing we do is we go back to the dispensary and say, ask them two questions. Who is their sponsor bank? And will that bank provide a letter to the merchant processor to provide to you acknowledging that they know the merchant processor is processing for cannabis operations. 90% of the time when we ask the client to go ask that question of the merchant processor, that's the end of the due diligence, because that merchant processor cannot deliver that information, cannot deliver that letter. So that is like litmus test number one. Ask the simple question. Who's your sponsor bank? As Kathy mentioned, you need a financial institution to settle those transactions. If somebody else is settling and they're not registered, then it's not compliant.
If you're not getting a straightforward answer, transparent answer, I think that's that's basically your answer right there. If people are saying, well, I don't know, I can't contact my bank, they won't give it to me. I mean, that's all subterfuge. And ignorance is not, an excuse for the law.
And Tina points out on the flip side, the Title 31 obligations for a depository institution, any financial institution, they're not altered at all by the proposed Safe Banking Act. It doesn't alleviate their responsibilities to detect and report suspicious activity.
And in fact, I mean, if one of your customers, Tina, were shut down, or that their cashless ATM system was brought to attention, I mean, wouldn't you have an obligation, to obviously file a heightened SARS, but possibly even close down their bank account? And I think, people think, well, okay, I'll lose my credit card, right? But if you lose your banking, how are you going to pay your investors in 10s and 20s? And if you lose your banking with GFA, it's not like you'll be able to go down the street to another bank. I mean, it'll be well known in the industry. So this is
just to add to that, Tina. I mean, many of your operators. I mean, there's thousands of cashless ATM machines in the country today. Many of your operators are using them. How are you approaching this? Is this a heightened concern that you're saying phase out, or you're continuing? They're continuing to use it. But what's your approach now or in the future going to be with cashless ATM, regardless of whether Visa shuts it down or MasterCard?
Yeah, Frank, that's a great question. I think that collectively we all work together, and we've been working diligently to try to minimize the amount of cash that a dispensary accepts. It's expensive. It's a public safety risk. It is not productive at the dispensary to be handling volumes of cash as they are. And so our goal has always been to see if we can reduce. So if you've got a $500,000 in sales this week, currently 250, about 50% is coming in cash. The other 50% is coming in through some other payment mechanism. So we've been trying to, find solutions to minimize that cash. And part of that solution obviously has been migrating consumers to use more of the cashless ATM solutions. But then we have this warning. And so that changes the dynamics of the direction and the vision. Not to, have this be a commercial here, but I do have to pause and say that, one of the solutions that we've been talking to our clients about is, if we see the light at the end of the tunnel and the light says that it's dim on cashless ATMs, then we don't want to wake up. We all don't collectively want to wake up tomorrow morning and find out that all the cashless ATM solutions have been shut down, and now we're 100% cash. So let's find some other solutions. It doesn't mean that it's an all or nothing, but let's have another solution that we can put into our toolbox. We can get consumers acclimated to using it. And that solution is KindTap. And I'll talk a little bit about why we believe that is a very effective solution, because as Kathy mentioned, there's transactions that mimic an ATM, and then there's transactions that run through the automated clearinghouse, the ACH, not the Visa rails, not MasterCard rails. I can provide 100% assurance because we are the originating depository financial institution for KindTap. I know that those transactions are not riding any rails of Visa, MasterCard, any of the big players. Those transactions are being routed to GFA. We serve as the originating depository financial institution, settle those transactions through the Fed, and get them into the cannabis dispensary's account in a very short period of time. And that, I just want to pause for a second, because when we go back to due diligence on cashless ATMs and other solutions, part of that due diligence questionnaire is, how long is it going to take for my transactions to get to me? If these transactions aren't getting credited to your dispensary account in a couple of days at most, then you have to be concerned about where are those transactions flowing. Are they leaving the country, coming back? Are they going into someone else's settlement account before getting to you? So we know that the kind tap transactions flow right from the consumer's account to the dispensary's account. We know that they are riding the rails of ACH and not the credit card companies. And then the other piece that I like about kind tap is, and Frank, you said this in your introduction, for the very first time, we know that we can offer clients, consumers, the option to buy their flower on credit. That's not a credit card. It is a revolving line of credit that GFA extends to the consumer. And so when they go to the dispensary or order online, they now have an option. I want to pay by having my checking account debited, or I want to buy utilizing my revolving line of credit. So it is the one solution today that I can say with 100% certainty that I know that it is compliant. That's not to say that there aren't others. I'm just saying.
No, there
I can
certainly
say
are.
because
There are.
I know what's under the hood.
Yeah, no, there are a number of companies that clearly are on the ACH rails. I'm not aware if they're offering credit, but they definitely are offering debit. And kind tap, and Kathy can talk about this, offers both features. But Kathy, I know you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, we do offer credit, and there's a lot of value to that in terms of increasing the basket size when now consumers can budget their purchases. But we felt it was important to mimic the experience that the consumer has with anytime they walk into a store, they have a choice with what their payment method is. One of the things that I'll say about kind tap, and this is partly because GFA required it, but it's really good practice, is we don't, show up and hide from due diligence. In fact, we perform due diligence on the merchants before they're allowed to join our network. And so we will turn someone down if we find that they don't pass the background checks or that there are issues. And we're very transparent. We go to their banks and we ask them to validate that they know that this mutual customer of ours is going to be in the cannabis business or is in that business. And so I think that's really important. And it was, because of my payments background, very important to kind tap that we embrace all the protections and controls that are out there and create an ecosystem where everybody knows and can understand the risk, rather than trying to obfuscate and hide what's really going on. And I think in the end, that's going to serve everybody very well, our consumers and our merchant clients.
No,
Go ahead, Terry.
I was just going to say, understanding the risk is so important. If we roll back to the Department of Justice back in August of 2013, and they issued their first policy, the subject title was guidance regarding marijuana enforcement. It was the 8 deadly sins, right? Thou shalt not have marijuana on federal property, sell to minors, and so on and so forth. And in February 14th, when they issued that second policy statement, once again, regarding marijuana, the subject title was different. Most people missed this. It was guidance regarding marijuana-related financial crimes. One of those crimes is Title 31 that we spoke about just briefly earlier. And the obligations, not just for the licensed operators, but for financial institutions as well.
Well, let's go a deeper dive with Scott and Terry about what does this mean if you are using these systems that are non-compliant? What are the real risks and exposure for an operator, for a bank? I know Tina touched on it, but let's give this a deeper dive. And I know you wanted to talk about some cases that have actually gone down, like the Ease case. So take us down that path and try not to scare us too much.
Well, I mean, it's kind of difficult, but you know, in the Ease case, the president, some consultants, essentially were hiding from MasterCard and Visa what these transactions really were.
Well, and Scott, for the audience, just talk a little bit about what that Ease case was about, delivery, what they were doing.
So in the Ease case, Ease was a delivery company, and they were doing credit card processing on their platform, but they weren't telling Visa or MasterCard that what they were processing were cannabis-related purchases or money. And they were actually sued, as well as brought before the authorities. I think one is, or two are in jail or have had their sentences somewhat commuted, but they've also been had to pay large restitution fines. And at the end of the day, they were charged with bank fraud. Now, they could have also possibly been charged with money laundering because they were hiding, you know, the true identity of these funds, as well as potentially RICO. But essentially, actually, it was actually the president, I think, was charged with conspiracy to commit bank fraud, while the two consultants who were sort of the masterminds were charged with the actual bank fraud component. And it's essentially what we come back to when we started this, is about transparency. And if you're hiding what these transactions are, and what they did was actually they miscoded. So when a transaction goes through the MasterCard Visa rails, there's certain merchant codes that have to be used, like restaurant or retail or whatever. And there is no code for cannabis. And thus, so anyone who tells you that they have a MasterCard or Visa solution, well, it is impossible to have one, because MasterCard and Visa do not have a code for a cannabis purchase by a consumer or B2B. And thus, what are you doing then? You are lying. And what is lying? Lying is fraud. And fraud will get you to a lot of trouble, both in terms of going to jail potentially, but certainly huge monetary fines.
Ease, or the former CEO of Ease. First of all, let me say Ease was not charged, and it's my understanding that as a company they were not
Yes.
during the investigation. Okay, so as the former CEO of Ease, and he was prosecuted in the Southern District of New York, which is one of the most powerful United States attorney's offices in the nation, along with the help of the money laundering and asset removal section at Maine Justice. So charging him with bank fraud, can be a penalty up to $1 million and 30 years or both. It's pretty significant. Whereas we take a look at money laundering charges under Title 18, Section 1956, where those transactions were cloaked through those financial institutions, that took 20 years. Let me tell you, 20 years, 30 years, one day in federal prison, one day, too long. It's probably low-hanging fruit for the Department of Justice, not having to argue that the marijuana, the proceeds were from state legal sales, and having to separate from what may have been medical versus what may have been recreational. It's a pretty good slam dunk on the department side. So we take a look at what's transpiring now with these cashless ATMs, and big corporation Visa and probably Discovery and the others are concerned about them as well. You know, DOJ will pick their targets and then they'll go after them. And I don't want to be the one, I'd never want to be the one that the Department of Justice has an issue with. So we got that policy to concern ourselves with. If you're a financial institution, if you're a merchant, if you're a dispensary, a retail outlet, and then there's those potential criminal exposure as well.
And also, you know, if let's just say your operation is solely medical marijuana, I think a lot of people believe the spending codicil to the spending bill, former Rohrabacher amendment, prevents the Justice Department from utilizing federal money to go after medical compliant being the word, medical marijuana operators. It does not prevent them to go after folks for bank fraud, for money laundering, for RICO, for everything else under the sun, because it deals with the monetary system. So people who are running medical operators only don't feel that the Rohrabacher Amendment is going to give you some type of shield. And then I think, another risk, taking it away from sort of this criminal field is, if you know fully that you're committing some type of fraud and you lose your bank account and you lose the ability to at someday utilize the Visa or MasterCard rails, you are opening yourself up to liability to your investors. And especially in the cannabis world, we are seeing more and more investor lawsuits for breaches of fiduciary duty and other issues. And if nothing else is going to scare you, having a bunch of your investors come after you, file a lawsuit, whether it's a class action or regular civil action, whatnot, for breaching fiduciary duty, committing fraud, committing this, and basically losing money for the operation, that alone should scare you as well. Never mind going to federal prison, like Terry just mentioned.
I would just add one thing.
Kathy, and
Go ahead, Tina.
go ahead.
I would just
going to say,
and that is that the consumer, with a lot of these workaround solutions and gray area solutions, is exposing their private personal information, their credit card numbers, debit card numbers. And so if the dispensary, if it gets back to the dispensary that, hey, 10% of your customers have been hacked, the customer is going to associate that hack with the dispensary, and there's going to be good negative ill will from the customers towards the dispensaries as well.
I mean, I was looking this morning over some statistics, and what it seems to be right now is about $7 billion, about 25%, excuse me, of all cannabis virtual transactions are going through cashless ATMs right now. I mean, that's a lot of money. So this is a huge issue. I think a lot of people think, oh, well, it's an isolated couple of cases here and there. DOJ is not going to go after us. Visa is not going to shut us all down. Well, and I think, we were having a conversation earlier, and as Kathy I think Kathy was saying, Visa processes or MasterCard processes like $7 gazillion trillion or whatever it is. So they will shut this down. If and DOJ will come and they will find the right case, and they will with the right operator, or maybe it's the wrong operator, but the right case, and come after folks.
And the Department of Justice can be doing that right now.
Exactly.
We know about it.
So I want to speak on behalf of our dispensary clients right now, because I know that they all struggle with this, and I think everyone's trying to do the right thing, but getting the education and having the time and the understanding, which is why I think this is a great webinar for them. But there's two other areas that we are often asked about, and perhaps maybe we can touch on it as well. One of them is gift cards. So is it permissible for a dispensary to sell gift cards that can then be given to others to come in and redeem for product? And then we're also starting to hear a lot of chatter about crypto, right? So I always tell clients, look, cannabis is a high-risk business already. Why do we want to add another high-risk business, crypto, on top of that? But I'd like opinions from all of you to share with our clients, please, on both the gift cards and crypto.
Kathy, you go ahead.
Yeah, I would say that some of those solutions can be compliant, like a gift card, as long as it is not branded and it's a private gift card, or a crypto wallet that the merchant takes some way offline. The problem is they are confusing as hell to the customers. Often the customer doesn't even know they've done it. They thought they were just purchasing cannabis, and now they suddenly see on their credit card statement that they've been charged for cryptocurrency, and they file a chargeback with the card association. And what ends up getting shut down is the provider who is providing that cryptocurrency solution as a cannabis workaround. And so things like that will come and go. They'll come because they seem attractive and easy to the dispensaries, but do not count on them sticking around for long if they are really poor solutions for the customers. Because when those chargebacks start hitting, the processor providing that, the merchant processor, will go out of business, or they'll be shut down due to the customer complaints and the high levels of chargebacks.
And I think it's also important to know, understand, look into, do due diligence. Does everyone along that chain understand that that purchase ultimately is to buy cannabis? And sometimes people, there are some very transparent systems out there. No one's saying there aren't, but in many cases, it is a workaround. It is purposefully set up so that way somewhere along the chain, someone doesn't realize, a financial institution or whomever, that this is for cannabis because they need to hide it, because otherwise, well, they're not going to be able to purchase it. And that's the whole point of this whole conversation with cashless ATMs, crypto, and other types of forms of payment. It's not the payment. It's not the cannabis per se. It's the fraud element, right? It's not being transparent. It's telling one person a falsehood in order to effectuate a commercial transaction. And so regardless if this were cannabis or some other type of high risk activity, I mean, these are issues that are throughout the system. It's not just cannabis. It's about being transparent. I mean, money laundering didn't just happen once the cannabis industry started, right? And that's what 2014 FinCEN guidelines in many ways were created to address. BSA is certainly not anything new to the cannabis industry.
I'll just add one thing on that, Tina's gift card question. The way around that, Tina, is you use KindTap to buy the gift card. There you go. So we do want to take some questions, but I want to ask this question to Terry particularly. So Terry, if you were handicapping this, do you see the credit card companies shutting down the cashless ATM? Do you see a real risk of the DOJ doing anything in this area as well?
So as far as the credit card companies, they already have. I know of instances out here in California, and California is still the largest legal cannabis market in our country. It's also the largest black market, right? So they have been shutting down some of these payment processors when they're changing those merchant codes on those machines. I can't say what the department will or won't do, but I know that they like to take their limited resources and do very complex, high-profile cases, like they did in the former CEO for Ease, and just whack them. So they want to send that message out there. I concern myself if I had multiple dispensaries and I wasn't doing my due diligence, and due diligence is not that difficult. Both Kathy and Tina gave out a very nice list of some very, very basic things to do. Listen, and let me just touch on crypto real quick. There's a lot of legitimate use for crypto. It's big action right now, but it's also a red flag in the law enforcement community. Crypto is often cloaked in by criminal organizations, whether they're Colombian cartels or the public enemy number one out of Russia, in all sorts of different types of crime. So I would guide financial institutions to stay away from cryptocurrency right now and in their cannabis banking programs.
Well, the only other thing I want to add to what you had said previously, talking about the DOJ, is there are a number of people on this call, and there are certainly a number of major operators in the United States that are also publicly listed and deal with various securities exchanges. And some of them are clearly using these non-compliant systems. As I said at the beginning, you can't say that you didn't know that your receipts had a different address. I mean, let's be real with ourselves. And to the extent that they are doing that, I would tell them to check very seriously with their internal compliance, reevaluate the platforms they are using, because they are exposing themselves to multiple risks, including getting delisted if the DOJ was to go after them. And there are alternatives out there, whether it's KITAP or somebody else. There are alternative compliant platforms that you can choose from that you don't need to be taking this risk. So with that, what we want to do is we encourage anybody online to please send us questions. We've gotten a few so far. The panel, I believe, can see those questions. And I'll just start with one out to Tina. Does the customer's bank have liability if their customer uses their debit card at a dispensary with a cashless ATM? I think you kind of highlighted about that, but I don't know if you have anything further to talk on that question, number 5.
So do we have liability if their customer uses the debit card at a dispensary with a cashless ATM? I would say that absolutely, without a doubt. We are allowing those transactions to flow through the organization. And so therefore, as I said earlier, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, we're all in this together, which is why the cannabis-friendly financial institution does want to make certain that the dispensary is doing business with a compliant processor. Transactions are transparent. When a financial institution looks at serving the cannabis industry, we have a saying at Lighthouse, and it's eyes on money. So as long as, we have to validate that every dollar that's coming into the credit union and every dollar that's leaving the credit union is coming from permissible sources, not illicit funds entering or exiting and going to gangs, cartels, or whatever. That includes cashless ATMs, debit, credit, any kind of transactions whatsoever. It is our responsibility to know that our consumers, our clients, are operating in full compliance. And sometimes that seems far-reaching. Oftentimes, we do have to explain to dispensaries why we care, but we absolutely do have the responsibility of knowing that those transactions are not being miscoded and that they are proper and above board and transparent.
Okay. A good question. And again, I think part of this is going to be answered by the fact that the Fed is aware of transactions. But one question is, if the Fed owns the ACH system, how can they support transactions for a federally illegal substance? This doesn't seem to be more compliant. Terry, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think the general answer to that question is, and sometimes there's a lot of confusion, can a state chartered bank or a state chartered credit union bank the industry, whereas a federal chartered bank or federal credit union bank the industry because federally it's illegal? FinCEN's guidance is intended for all financial depository institutions, those that have and others that have a responsibility under Title 31 to enhance the availability of banking services for the state legal cannabis industry. And what it does to the industry is it helps them at a time when they're so challenged with the black market. By having a non-cloak relationship at Lighthouse Biz, GFA, and working with an institution to help them. No business can survive without a bank account. Just like it's very difficult to survive if you don't have a Visa, a MasterCard, a Chase, a debit, what have you.
And I think the key is it's transparent, right? So the players, so GFA, they are well aware of what the transactions are that are running over the ACH wires. And if I'm not mistaken, Tina, your examiners have reviewed this program. They are well aware of what's going on. Now, while cannabis is federally legal, they can't technically, or most examiners will not say, yes, it's okay, but they will let you know if it's not okay.
I would say it's safe to say that everything that's done is scrutinized by examiners for good reason.
Right.
Yeah, no, as Terry said, it's really a misnomer that you can't bank this industry. When we're dealing with payments and processing, it's MasterCard, Visa, Amex, et cetera. Their rules and policies are, we're not going to allow you to go over our rails. That's different than the HCH allowing you because it's acknowledged, it's open, it's transparent. And while the federal banks have not really gotten into this industry, one would argue there's really nothing preventing them. Mostly it's their own internal policies, procedures, stigma, et cetera. But if Wells Fargo wanted to get in tomorrow, they could get into tomorrow, and the feds would certainly work with them.
And there
So
are some federally chartered banks who are on NASDAQ who do have some pilot programs with cannabis, take cannabis deposits. So
It's the credit unions, though, that cut their teeth learning how to bank this industry. I think GFA, Tina has been banking, you mentioned earlier, I think since 2018, Tina?
2018.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
One thing I'd say to kind of put
And,
in
and you know,
perspective,
we're a federal credit union, so we're federally chartered. So there's no distinction to the point that was made. It's not a federal charter versus a state charter. Really, the risk appetite of the financial institution. And, you know, there are some, I was talking to another state where there are some financial institutions that after 2 or 3 years are closing shop because it is cumbersome. There is, you know, going back to that eyes on money, there is a lot of monitoring, a lot of reporting, a lot of due diligence, a lot of expectations. And some financial institutions get into it and then just realize that it is more work than what they could ever imagined. So I always say it's not for the faint of heart. Maybe one day that will be different, but you do have to be devoted to understanding the industry in order to do it in a compliant fashion. And why is it important to do it in a compliant fashion? Because just like it is important for operators to keep their financial institution in compliance so that we're together, we're cooperating, but it works the other way around as well. You don't want to be doing business with a financial institution that isn't compliant because that account isn't going to stay open very long.
And if I could just make one, I know we're reaching the end of our hour, but I want to just go back to something that Terry said earlier.
we're not time constrained. Go ahead, Scott. We can run over.
Okay. Well, anyways, I want to go back to something that Terry said. And it's kind of topical. So right now, the two of the sponsors of the Safe Banking Act are really pushing it for to be included, the Competes Act, and hopefully that'll be passed, whatnot. And I think, you know, whether that happens or not, we could probably spend the next half an hour debating. But I think what's important is that the Safe Banking Act is not necessarily going to open the floodgates for cashless ATM or even just regular Visa and MasterCard, right? It's Visa and MasterCard, at least now, have specifically stated until cannabis is, you know, prohibition is ended and federally legal, they will not allow it to run on the rails. And even if the Safe Act passes tomorrow, there's no code for cannabis transactions, right? So that's where it comes down to. And it will still be bank fraud that people are trying to mask, or I think, Kathy, you might have used the word mimic the transactions to be something else. So safe banking is not necessarily going to be a magic wand that's going to open the floodgates for credit card transactions.
yeah, and the statistic to help put in perspective why this is the case, that the large banks and the card associations don't want anything to do with cannabis. We're also proud of this industry, and 20 billion heading to 25 billion. There are $10 trillion of sales settled over ATM, credit, and debit cards in the US. And so our industry today represents 0.2% of the opportunity. It's simply too much risk for these large players to take this industry while it's in this regulatory never land.
And an out of control black market. So, a little advice to those MSOs, those large MSOs, those publicly traded or not. It's very difficult for financial institutions, as Tina pointed out. It's a ton of compliance. It's very, very intensive because there's a high level of responsibility that comes with a cannabis banking program, a well-run, well-established cannabis banking program. And we've seen since now beginning in 2020, we've seen 4 regulatory enforcement actions against 3 banks and 1 credit union for not having the programs built out the way they should be. So, and we see outside of that arena, outside of cannabis, we saw it was USAA Bank got hit with a $140 million fine this year, $390 million hit at Capital One National Association last year for not having proper AML BSA compliance programs. So when when the industry cut its teeth and they had dozens and dozens and dozens of LLCs for management companies and 280E and this and that and the other, and they still hold on to that mindset, it's very difficult for these financial institutions to wrap their arms around them and provide them the service that they need. So it's time to start to whittle down. I see some of them start to whittle down all those LLCs and bring your relationships into GFA, into single banking relationships, and not spread them out if you can.
And that relates to the fact that GFA, being a federal credit union, has nationwide field of membership. So if you have operations across multiple states, GFA can bank you.
So I'm just going to do one more question. It's actually two questions in one. It says GFA may realize it's a cannabis purchase. However, the originating bank or the consumer bank does not know it is funding cannabis purchases. I think the answer to that is, if you're referring to KindTap, GFA is the originating bank and is paying the dispensary directly. So that's one of the reasons why it's a fully compliant system. The funds aren't coming from another bank. KindTap extends the credit to the customer, and then it is settled by GFA directly with the dispensary. And then the customer obviously pays its line of credit back. And then somebody asked if we're starting to offer KindTap, how do we encourage customers to sign up without alerting them that using cashless ATM is not permissible? And maybe Kathy, you can answer that one.
Well, I look at it this way. When you go into any kind of a store to make a purchase, the merchant is going to take every payment form they can get because they want to get the sale. It's the consumer who decides how they want to pay. And so I don't think in this industry, I wouldn't be looking at it as I'm only taking this or I'm only taking that. I don't think the merchants are in a position to tell consumers what they can take. I think the consumer will tell. And as long as it's compliant and the merchant has done their due diligence to accept it, the merchant should be fairly indifferent as long as they're getting it offloading cash. So I would introduce it as kind of a natural evolution, another offering, particularly with the credit leading the way.
Great. Well, I want to thank our
think
panelists.
Kathy too. I'm sorry, I was just going
No,
to
go
say,
ahead.
to follow up on that question, there would be nothing that would prevent a dispensary from having both KindTap and their existing cashless ATM solution, which is what I said earlier, have a second source. And then over time, you can gradually migrate your customers over to KindTap without ever having to say that, you're planning on exiting the cashless ATM, or worse yet, having the cashless ATMs shut down and not have that solution in place the very next morning. So
Right.
you could have two solutions.
Yeah, you want to be prepared and ahead of what we all think is coming in this. So I want to thank my panelists for taking the time. I hope that our audience found this practical, insightful, and I hope we've demystified a lot of white noise out there being created by all these new platforms and what you're reading in the press. We do know that this is very timely. We do know that the credit card companies are taking a very serious look at it. And we certainly at B&L want our clients to be prepared for it. And I know that Tina and Kathy and Terry do as well. So we want to thank you. There were a number of other questions. We will try to reach out directly and answer them. And if you have other questions, please reach out to us, reach out to the panelists. You'll have their contact information. We will make sure that that we follow up. This will be posted on our various platforms, a video recording. And as I said, we're here to service the industry. We're here to help the industry. And if there's anything we can do for you in the audience, please don't hesitate to call everybody on this platform. And thank you for your time today.
Takes a village.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.